21 elephants, walking, in the middle of the night, through miles and miles of thick African bush. No one called them. No one told them anything. No one even knew they were coming. But somehow they knew. They knew that the one man who had ever shown them kindness, the one man who had sat beside their fence night after night, just to talk to them, had just taken his last breath. Think about what that actually means for a second. These were wild elephants. They lived miles deep inside the reserve. They had their own lives, their own routines, their own world. And yet, within hours of this man dying, they started moving, all 21 of them, together, toward his home. They walked for 12 hours straight. Marcus Reed died on the morning of April 9th, 2011. A heart attack. No warning, no goodbye, nothing. He was 63 years old. His wife, Elena, got the call just before sunrise. She did not scream. She did not say a word. She just sat down on the kitchen floor and stayed there. The man she had spent 27 years of her life with, the man who had dragged her away from their comfortable city life to live on a dusty game reserve in South Africa, was gone. Just like that. For 2 days, Elena barely moved from the bedroom. Friends came. Staff came. People brought food, said kind words, and left. She heard none of it. She was somewhere else entirely, lost in a grief so heavy it felt like something sitting on her chest. And then, on the second day, one of the young workers burst through the front door. He was out of breath. His eyes were wide. He said only 4 words. "Ma'am, they are here." Elena did not understand. She did not move at first, but then she heard it. The sound, low and deep, like thunder coming from the ground itself. A rumbling that you do not just hear with your ears. You feel it in your chest, in your bones. She walked to the window, and what she saw stopped her completely. 21 elephants, standing in a line along the fence outside the house. Still, silent, just standing there, staring at the house, their trunks hanging low, their ears barely moving. The one at the front, the biggest female, the one Marcus had named Adira, was looking directly at Elena's window. Not past it, not through it, directly at her. Elena stood there and could not speak, could not move. These animals had not visited the house in almost 2 years. They lived far away, deep in the reserve. There was no reason for them to be here. No food, no water, nothing that would normally bring them this way. Except him, except Marcus. And somehow, some way, they knew he was gone. To understand why 21 wild elephants showed up at a dead man's home, you have to go back to 1998, back to the moment Marcus Reed made the decision that everyone in his life thought was completely insane. Marcus was not a wildlife expert. He was not a scientist. He had spent most of his career running a small construction company in Cape Town. He was good at it. He made decent money. He had a nice house, a steady life, a future that made sense on paper. But something was always pulling at him. He had grown up near the bush. As a child, he used to sit for hours, just watching animals move through the land near his grandfather's farm. There was something about it that made him feel calm in a way nothing else ever did. So in 1998, at the age of 50, he sold everything, the business, the house, nearly all of it, and he bought a worn-down game reserve in the Limpopo region of South Africa for 1,000 acres of dry grass, thorn trees, and red soil. He named it Sianda. In Zulu, it means we are growing. Elena thought he had lost his mind. She told him this directly, more than once. But she also knew that when Marcus decided something, there was no talking him out of it. So she packed her things and followed him into the bush. The first 2 years were hard. The reserve had no proper infrastructure. The animals that lived there were skittish and scattered. Money was always tight. But Marcus was patient. He fixed the roads. He repaired the water points. He hired local staff and actually listened to them. Slowly, Sianda started to breathe again. And then came the call that changed everything. A wildlife relocation officer named Sifo contacted him one afternoon. His voice was flat and tired, the voice of someone delivering bad news for the 10th time that week. There was a herd of elephants, 11 of them. They had been living on a private reserve about 500 kilometers away, but the owner had sold the land to a developer. The elephants had 30 days before the land was cleared. Every reserve in the region had already said no. The herd was considered unstable, dangerous, too much trouble. Marcus listened to all of it. Then he said yes. The elephants arrived on a Tuesday evening, just before sunset. Marcus stood at the gate of the holding enclosure. He had spent 3 weeks building. His hands were in his pockets. His staff stood behind him, quiet, nobody really knowing what to expect. The transport truck backed in slowly. The ramp dropped, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then Adira came out first. She was enormous, easily 10 feet tall. She stepped off the ramp and immediately stopped. Her trunk went up. She turned her head slowly, taking in everything around her. The trees, the fence, the people. Then she looked directly at Marcus. It was not a curious look. It was not a scared look. It was something harder than both of those. It was the look of an animal that had been through enough to trust nothing and no one. The rest of the herd followed her out one by one. 3 adult females, 2 younger ones, for calves, and at the very back, a teenage male, maybe 14 years old, moving slowly, with his head low. Marcus would later name him Cabo. He walked like something heavy was sitting on him that nobody else could see. What Marcus did not fully know yet, but would learn over the coming days, was what this herd had already been through. 2 years before arriving at Cianda, they had been caught in the middle of a culling operation on a neighboring property. In front of the whole herd, 3 of their family members had been killed, including Adira's mother, including Cabo's older sister. They had watched it happen, and they had carried it with them every single day since. That first night, the herd did not sleep. Marcus watched them from a distance through the dark. They paced. They rumbled. Adira kept returning to the same corner of the fence, pressing her head against it, testing it. She was not settling in. She was looking for a way out. By morning, Marcus had made a decision that his staff thought was dangerous, and Elena thought was completely mad. He was going to sleep outside, right next to the fence, every night, for as long as it took. Not to watch them, not to study them, just to be there. The first night Marcus sat beside the fence, Adira stood with her back to him the entire time. He did not try to get her attention. He did not make any sudden movements. He just sat on the ground with his back against a tree stump and talked, quietly, like he was talking to an old friend. He talked about the reserve, about the rain that had come last week, and how the grass was already coming back greener than it had been in years. He talked about the hornbill that kept stealing food from the kitchen window every morning. Small things, everyday things. Nothing happened. Adira did not turn around. The herd stayed far back inside the enclosure. Cabo watched from the shadows with those heavy eyes. Marcus went home just before sunrise and came back the next night, and the night after that. A week passed. Then, too, his staff stopped asking questions about it, because he never really answered them anyway. Elena left a blanket by the door every evening, without saying a word. Around the 3rd week, something small shifted. Marcus was sitting in his usual spot, talking about nothing in particular, when Adira slowly turned her head. Not her whole body, just her head. She looked at him for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. Then she looked away. That was it. That was the whole thing. But Marcus felt it like a door opening somewhere. He did not react, did not move. He just kept talking in the same quiet voice and stayed until sunrise. The next night, she turned her head again, stayed looking a little longer this time. The night after that, she took 3 steps toward the fence while he was mid-sentence, and then stopped herself, like she had caught herself doing something she was not ready for yet. Cabo started positioning himself closer to the fence too, not approaching, not trusting, just choosing to be nearer than before. 6 weeks in, on a night with no moon and a sky full of stars, Adira walked all the way to the fence. She stopped right in front of where Marcus was sitting. Her trunk came forward slowly, reached through the gap between the wires, and touched his shoulder. 3 seconds, maybe less. Then she pulled back and walked away. Marcus sat completely still for a long time after that. That single moment at the fence changed everything. Within days, Adira stopped pacing the perimeter. The herd started eating properly, sleeping through the night, moving through the enclosure like animals that had decided, somewhere deep inside, that maybe this place was safe. Even Cabo, that broken teenage bull who carried grief in every step he took, started coming closer during Marcus's nightly visits. He never touched the fence, but he would stand just a few feet back, ears relaxed, listening. 3 months after they arrived, Marcus opened the gate. His staff watched from a distance. Elena stood on the porch with her arms crossed, holding her breath. Adira walked to the open gate and stopped. She stood there for a long time, trunk raised, reading the air. Behind her, the herd waited. Then she walked through, slowly, calmly, and instead of running, instead of disappearing into the bush the way everyone expected, she stopped about 20 meters out and started grazing. The rest followed. Just like that, they stayed on Cianda. They chose to. Over the next 13 years, Marcus and the herd built something that had no clean scientific name for it. He walked among them. He knew each one by the way they moved, the sounds they made, the moods they carried on different days. Adira would bring the herd to graze near the house most evenings. Cabo, as he grew older, would sometimes stand close to Marcus in a way that felt less like animal behavior and more like company. The herd grew. Calves were born. Cianda grew with them. And then Marcus was gone. 13 years after that first night beside the fence, his heart gave out. He died not knowing what would happen next, not knowing that within hours, Adira would begin moving, that she would lead all 21 of them through 12 hours of bush, through the dark, through the heat, back to the house, back to him. They stood outside for 2 full days. Elena eventually walked to the fence on the second night. She did not say much. She just told them he had loved them, that she believed they had loved him too. Adira's trunk moved slightly. Then she turned, and one by one, they walked back into the dark. Some things do not need an explanation. They just need to be felt.